cash flow underwrite that banks use in real time. Now, the reason why I use this one is I built this out to different lenders' requirements. So it's pretty stress test where if you run a scenario on this and you meet all of the actual requirements and thresholds such as the DSCR, this will pretty much absorb any lender in the market. So, the first thing, as you know, is that this is really the target DSCR. But what I will encourage you guys to really focus on is, making sure that you guys understand the current vacancy factor in the market. For residential, it's 5%. For commercial, it's 10%. So when filling these out, make sure you're properly allocating residential rents and itemized breakdown and commercial rents and itemized breakdown. Because if you don't itemize them accordingly, you're going to be having a pretty false underwrite, which could obviously potentially cost you money in the future. The other thing to note is every single bank right now, commercial, however you want to underwrite your deal, is underwriting based on real-time as-is cash flow. If you have a vacant unit in a building, let's say it's a residential building, mixed use, they'll give you credit because it's vacant. But if you have a half-vacant building, and you're saying that rents are going from $1,500 a month to $1,800 a month. Well, that's no work. Stop. Bring your kid to work day. So I apologize, guys. You have to keep in mind that banks aren't going to give you credit for that $1,800 a month until you've established that. So if the last rental was $1,500, they're going to give you credit for $1,500 until you bring a full brand new lease, security deposit, and confirmation that that's the rent. Banks got into problems right now because they were lending on future cash flow once a project is completed, and they realized that some rents didn't achieve those hurdles. All right. In New Jersey, there's a very large bank, Provident Bank, that has been trying to acquire a smaller local community bank for 2 years, and the completion just got done about a week and a half ago. Part of the regulator's approval to sign off on that actual merger and acquisition was they cannot lend one more dollar of commercial real estate until they raise $200 million of new outside capital, which means that they have so much exposure in the commercial real estate multifamily market that that's the regulator's requirements because what's coming due. Now, the OCC is, the Office of Controller that regulates banks. They're out right now looking for banks that have been kicking the can down the road. So as the market condenses and as these losses become more public and visible in every sector of commercial real estate, guidelines are only going to tighten. They're not going to loosen. But the key right now is understanding what banks are out there and that have a healthy balance sheet, that have adequate capital, that are able to fund deals in real time based on your client's needs. So one big avenue of what we do is providing bridge lending or bridge financing, where we could still underwrite a deal to future cash flow to bridge that gap to maybe get a client more leverage to get a deal done, rather than have them put 50 or 60% down, where we'd be willing to lend them 65% loan to value, even 80% loan to value. One other creative component that we really enjoy doing for clients that have a good real estate, a performing real estate portfolio, is cross-collateralizing other assets. I can't tell you how many times clients have come to us where a lender or a bank said, hey, we'll finance 80% of your transaction. And the week before, they go to underwrite and they adjust that 80 down to 70, and the borrower was short $500,000, where again, if they can't close because they don't have the capital, we'll be able to record for the right client a second lien in second position for a client's other cash flowing asset. Henry, I'm sure you see a lot of deals that we post and close. I like to post all the creative deals that I do in real time because I know everyone's involved in a scenario in this market where things get dropped really close to closing. Just on Monday, we had a client that was supposed to close, a broker, a $2.3 million sale in Connecticut. They were supposed to close on Friday night. The bank never showed up to the closing, and the borrower, it was a foreclosure. The borrower had $140,000 on deposit, and the bank just didn't show up, didn't close the deal. The realtor thought she was walking away with a $120,000 commission check. He called me Monday morning. We issued a term sheet. We're closing on April 30th. So not only did we just save this client, who's a builder, a $2 million profit margin once he's completed, we just helped the realtor save her $120,000 commission. So I give you guys that as an example because we can go over cash flow underwrites all day long. At the end of the day, when we deal with each other, I'm a big believer in trust, transparency, speed, and accuracy. So the more data that you provide me with, the quicker we could get an educated decision, the sooner you guys know you're able to button up a deal. And I think, like, again, in this market right now, we will never be the cheapest. We can't be the cheapest because we have investors and we have relationships that we have to maintain. We have office space, we have due diligence, we have a full team, we have a full staff, right? Usually the cheapest comes with the cheapest service. We are as competitive as anybody in the marketplace. And I would put our knowledge and deals that we've closed in the past 36 months up against any institution, any bank, any lender, any broker in the country. So Henry, I don't know if you want to walk through like maybe an underwrite on that deal that you had posted in the chat, or where you want to take
if you
this.
want to, we can start with the one that you have in the chat. At least it's a little bit of a breakdown. I'll let you start plugging in the numbers on my chat for a little bit. Yeah, so just to kind of reiterate for everyone, this is, people like Jeff, right, are not only fantastic lenders in general, where, if you have a deal going on, obviously give him an opportunity to work with you on your next deal, but also it's a situation where hypothetically you're working with a lender that you might have relationships with, and in these type of economic times, you're seeing that the traditional banker, the traditional lender that maybe had a fantastic year in 2020, 21, 22, who does not have the insane amount of experience that somebody like Jeff has around doing, these types of creative financing deals and being able to close quick and being able to, save these deals that might actually end up possibly dying. He's a great person to have in your back pocket for these types of situations. So please do keep that in mind. Again, his information's down in the chat box here below. So by the way, in the chat, there's the deal. I want to start underwriting. Jeff, I don't know if you can see that.
Yep. So Henry, what I wanted to do is I want to show everyone that's on this call how I operate as if you had just called me as a borrower, sponsor, client. And the reason why I think that'd be valuable is I want to walk everyone through this flow, because my opinion is if you're in real estate as a professional, you should be able to somewhat replicate my process of what I do early on when you're pre-screening a deal. And that will help people feel more comfortable in asking the right questions. So Henry, I understand you're looking at a property of value add. What is your purchase price of this asset? Hypothetically.
So John, by the way, if you want to come off mute and work with us on this one, your deal is the one in the chat. So you want to,
sure.
Basically, you'll be asking questions with John.
Hey, John, how are you?
Good. I appreciate it, man.
My pleasure. So I understand you're looking to purchase this asset potentially. What do you believe is or will be the final purchase price?
Final purchase price would be $4
million even? Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, do you know if this asset needs any type of renovation or construction budget?
I do think that it's going to need some renovation of the property, yeah.
Do you know about how much that might be? So really what we look for when we hear of an asset being acquired that might have some value add upside is, do we do it as a construction loan day one? Or do we plan to do some type of hybrid where it's an acquisition, maybe with no prepayment penalty, that once you're in and you stabilize, the basics and establish your cash flow, do we then look to do some type of construction opportunity for you to keep the most amount of money in your pocket? So in a perfect world, how much dollar amount do you think this asset would need for renovations?
I'll probably say the bare minimum, 200.
So because it's such a light number in conjunction with the actual purchase price, let's just call that 5%. I don't know if you have an extra 200,000 lying around. Maybe you want to consider, just to get the more favorable rate up front, spending this money strategically as apartments turn over or as vacancies come about. That way you're not paying a higher rate on a larger balance, but we can explore both avenues. So the first thing that we look for on a deal like this is, what is the total cost of the project? So the total cost of the project, even though you're buying it for $4 million, would come out to a $4.2 million acquisition and construction. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Let's go over the current cash flow in place. How many total residential units are there?
There's 28.
Okay. And what is the combined monthly rent on those 28 units?
Yeah, 34 grand.
34,000 a month?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. And are any of those 28 units vacant by any chance, or are they fully occupied?
It's fully occupied.
Excellent. Now, of those 28 units, do you believe any of those leases that are going to be expiring soon are way below market rent, where we could potentially be leaving some dollars on the table?
I think that they're all below market.
About how much percentage-wise? So like 34,000, once you come in and do what you do best, does that number become 40,000 a month, 38,000 a month? How much arbitrage is there?
So we're at 34. I think you could probably do about 39,000 a month.
Great. So you think you could raise about 12 to 14%. And what time frame do you think it would take you? Is it 6 months? Is it 12 months? Is it 2 years? What does that look like?
I think it's going to take a year and a half.
What? So like 18 months to fully stabilize.
And just to be clear, so John, you think you can only raise the rents of $1,400 each?
I think just based on looking in the area of what's renting for a studio, I've seen Mostly,
So I'm
mostly
saying
like
$1,400 is the market value, and after
that's what I.
renovations.
So the units are okay. He's done some work to the units. There's probably, I don't know how much more you could do to the units. You might be able to push 1,500 if you really, really did it really nice.
So I'm just saying. So if we did 1,450
Okay.
times 28 units, that's 40,600. By the way, is
Got it. So we think an upside potentially of 40,600 once it's all updated and
correct.
properly managed. Excellent. And as far as commercial, are there any commercial units?
No.
He explained that. What do you mean by commercial units?
Retail.
Sure. Retail, office,
Nope.
parking,
Mm-mm.
none of that.
Nope.
Okay. Okay. Very good. And let's go down to the expenses now. And this is where we really have to dig in deep, because a lot of people post expenses that aren't really expenses, and some people post expenses that aren't taken into account or consideration. So let's start off with the property insurance. I understand Florida is getting crushed with property insurance. What is the most recent insurance premium for this property?
73,000.
Hold on,
Yeah, it's a big number. Got it.
73.
And then-
Hold on, 1 second. 73,000 was property taxes, not insurance.
Oh,
You have
sorry.
31 and a
I'm
half.
wrong. 31,500. I'm looking at the T12. I'm sorry.
Apologize for that, guys. Thank you, Henry, for catching that. And then as far as utilities go, who's responsible for paying the utilities?
He is the landlord.
Okay, and what were those utilities for the last year reported?
Last year, electric was 22,006, around 22,600.
Okay.
Water is 13,200,
Okay.
and gas is about 3,500.
Okay, very good.
Did you want to add trash into it, or that's a separate category for you?
Some lenders underwrite to that. It's kind of depends on the lender. We could add it in here. Let's just be ultra conservative from our underwrite. So if we could get trash, that'd be great.
Okay, so 4,800.
Excellent. Okay. So what we've just established is the current cash flow on the property. And I just put in a hypothetical scenario on what the loan amount looks like here. So let me try and close this out. So as of right now, we can finance a multifamily 85% total loan to cost. So if you're at a $4.2 million number, if this cash flowed appropriately, which it doesn't currently, we'd be able to have you get into this deal with about $650,000 total out of pocket. Now, what I did here was underwrite based on about where rates are on multifamily and at that 85% loan to cost. Now, this DSCR has to be 1.25, which means we're way off from what we can get you and what we could refinance you out of. So now we have to play around with this number to see, really where this pencils out based on its current cash flow, which obviously it's underperforming. And it looks like, let's see. So again, you could argue that as of today, you would have to bring about $2.2 million to the table in order to meet this 1.25 DSCR requirement, right? Now, what I like to do is say, okay, if we could raise the rents in that 18-month number, how much does that give us? You see how that just jumped up by 41?
Mm-hmm.
Big number here, right? So now we go going back and say, okay, how far off are we? And that puts us somewhere at about, see the big difference there, right? So once you get your actual rent roll in place, you'd be at a $2.65 million loan amount at a 7% rate. Now, here's the other thing. Right now, most lenders are underwriting to a 25-year amortization. If we have a favorable lender that really wants to do business with us based on our track record, and we could sell it accordingly, and we get them to do a 30-year amortization, we could actually get the loan amount up. And this is where the relationships come into play of asking favors and showing the strength of the sponsor. So like just right here, we were able to get the loan amount up by, call it $175,000 just by getting that amortization to 30 years opposed to 25 years, which is obviously a big difference. Also in something like this, we deal with a lot of the larger institutional Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac lenders, and their current rate right now is still around 6%. So I always underwrite the bank's requirements first, and then I try and deal with the major national players in the secondary market. So as you could see, this becomes a little bit more favorable as the terms, get adjusted. So I would say, like, realistically, my personal opinion would be probably day one, if we structure it strategically, call it a $3.1 million loan amount. Just from knowing all the numbers and based on the information you guys have provided, John, have you been following this or am I moving too quickly?
No, I'm good. Yeah, I appreciate it.
So what I always do is I always run my stress test first to see how far we off from reality. And then I back into how do we get what we want. So I'm very confident day one, if you're buying this for 4 million and it needs $200,000 worth of work at closing, I could show up with $3.1 million for you through one of our strategic relationships or partnerships or capital providers. And then that way you would be able to maximize your financing. Otherwise, any other way that we would attack or approach this deal, it looks like you would have to bring $2.2 million to the closing, plus closing costs, maybe an interest reserve. So, just on a 10-minute phone call back and forth, you and I strategically have kept $1.1 million in your pocket or lessened your target to hit by $1.1 million.
You guys see these deals all the time where like you have sellers that they want 5 caps or 6 cap deals, or they have like these types of deals that they've owned for 10, 20, 30 years, where they haven't raised the rents in quite some time, and they're trying to sell it to you like, oh, but it has this upside, or you could raise the rent so you can do this or this. This is why it's important to understand pro forma values correctly, and not selling pro forma, but understanding where pro forma values can actually reasonably be, because on the lending side, it's important to pay attention to that, right? Because that's where it really helps you. Obviously, as an investor, you're not going to want to buy a property because pro forma could be ridiculous. It is something to consider. But when you're getting a loan, that's where pro forma numbers are very important, because it is something to be paying attention to.
Absolutely, guys. And, so as I said, I've tried to build them. I'm going to stop sharing the screen so we just talk for a couple. But from a mindset standpoint, as I said about being anti-fragile, anti-fragility is definitely something that the market needs, and I have sponsors, borrowers that get told half information from banks. Sorry, we can't do your deal. Well, why? And they never get told why. So I had somebody that called me up in Brooklyn who had a multifamily loan coming due. They owe $2.8 million on it. I plugged their exact rent roll and expenses in, and I said, based on current rates, you only qualify for $1.8 million. And they're like, well, we don't have $1 million to pay that loan down. And I said, unfortunately, you, amongst many other people that either bought at the height of the market where rates were near zero, or you cash out refinanced, when rates were near zero at strong cash flows. Now rates have doubled, your loan's coming due. Unfortunately, this is the scenario. And this is what I alluded to in the beginning of the call. The OCC, which regulates banks and lenders, is coming in saying, okay, well, even though you're paying on this $2.8 million loan, the rents can technically still cover the debt. You're extending a loan and reporting the loan as current, even though this is just a ticking time bomb, because you can never refinance out of this loan to support actual lending requirements. Like if you don't have a 1.25% DSCR based on your audited financials, that loan is technically not a safe loan to be done, right? Banks are deceiving everybody right now. Every single bank, including JP Morgan Chase, the biggest of the biggest, have exposure to commercial real estate, multifamily real estate. So this is where the opportunity lies for you guys, because you guys are dealing with these property owners all day long.